Now that you went through the rejection process, you finally got Tucker Goober, and he's all for it. When did Burton come involved, and when did the story actually start taking? Like, when did actually pen get to paper, and they said like, okay, we got the site, you got the story down, and we have the director.
Oh my God, there were so many different directors that were either considered or attached. It was just a procession. When we started, they said, "Who would you like to write this?" And I said, "I would love to get one of the two top Bond writers to do this." And at that time, that was Tom Mankiewicz and Richard Maybaum. And we approached both, and ultimately Tom Mankiewicz was the guy from the Mankiewicz family. Joseph Mankiewicz, and currently on Turner Classic Movies, Ben Mankiewicz. Okay. An amazing, Herman Mankiewicz, amazing family with a legendary background in the movie industry. And Tom was great, absolutely great. So we were working on developing that, and at one point Guy Hamilton, who had directed Goldfinger, had been considered. This is how early we were at the time. At one point, I got an emergency call. I had to go to a screening. They were setting up that night for me to see a movie called The Stuntman, because there was interest in getting Richard Rush attached as director. Then we got Ivan Reitman as a director, and then we were on hold for him while he had to go off and shoot Ghostbusters. And then Ivan was out. Then Joe Dante was in. And then Joe left to do The Explorers. And, I mean, kind of the list goes on and on. It was delay after delay after delay. Finally, in 1986, thanks to a guy named Roger Birnbaum, one of the smartest, greatest studio execs and producers in the business, we found Tim Burton. And the call came from the exec at Warner's, and he said, "Michael, I'm setting up a screening for you of the fine cut of this movie called Pee-wee's Big Adventure. You got to see this guy and tell us what you think." So they did that. And after I saw it, I said, "I've never seen a more brilliant marriage of direction and art direction in my life. I would love to meet this guy." So they then set up 3 lunches with me with Tim, circa 1986. And shockingly, Tim was not a real comic book fan. Never mind a Batman fan, not a real comic book fan. I just kind of assumed young animators, he had done Frankenweenie, for example, right. Would be really into it, but he wasn't so much. And my mission was to indoctrinate him into the world of Batman, the world that I wanted him to see, the serious, dark version. So I gave him copies of comics right out of my collection that only showed the darker Batman and kept him away from all the silly stuff. So the comics included the first year's run in Detective, going up through the introduction of Robin, Batman #1, which was the first Joker and the first Catwoman story. Then I gave him comics from the run of Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams in the 70s, and I gave him the Marshall Rogers, Steve Englehart stuff. And those, to me, were the 3 best serious approaches to Batman over the years. And by the end of the 3rd lunch, I knew this was it. This was it. Tim Burton had, in my career, and it's now 42 years, I've worked with 3 people I consider to be geniuses. 2 of them were on the 1989 Batman movie. I think Tim Burton was a genius. Tim had this vision. And he not only had developed the passion for Batman and the knowledge for Batman, but he had a vision as to how to make the first ever dark and serious comic book superhero movie. And he knew how much we were being challenged. He goes, "How do you do a movie like this, showing a guy getting dressed in a batsuit and going out to fight a guy who looks like the Joker without getting unintentional laughs from it?" And he had a concept for the world building. As he said to me, "Michael, Gotham City has to be the 3rd most important character in this movie, because if audiences don't believe in Gotham City, they will never believe in a guy getting dressed up as a bat and fighting the Joker." And he was so utterly right about it. And that's really what began everything. And a lot of people say, well, was The Dark Knight Returns the big influence on that? Was that the biggest role played here? And the answer is no. It was Tim's vision that came first. And then was there a positive influence from Frank's great work? Yes, but that influence was more centered on the Hollywood people who now saw that comic books were being made in a more adult way that could be sold to general audiences and older audiences around the world. And, oh, you mean they really are not just for 8 to 12-year-old boys anymore? And that was really helpful at that time, but less so in terms of Tim's vision. That vision belonged to him and then was executed by the genius number 2, my dear friend Anton Furst. And it was Anton, upon getting Sam Hamm's script that only had a one-line description of Gotham City, which was basically as if hell has erupted from under the earth. And Anton said to Tim, well, what does this mean? And Tim told Anton, he goes, I think it means New York City had there never been any planning and zoning. And then Anton goes, okay, I get that, and goes off, does his research, and then ultimately comes back with all the plans for Gotham City, the design of the Batmobile, the whole look of the picture. And I maintain to this very day, every single, not just comic book movie, but genre movie that comes out, you can still see the influence of Tim Burton's vision. You can still see the influence of Anton Furst's design work. Yes. And you can even feel the influence of the notes of Danny Elfman. So it was a revolutionary movie. It not only impacted the box office, it impacted the world culture. And that's something I'm extremely proud about. For me personally, it was a long time dream come true that started as an 8-year-old boy who fell in love with this particular superhero because he was human, because he had the greatest villains in the world and drove the coolest car ever. And I thought this would become my career work, and what it actually turned into was my life work.